Let's turn now to some breaking headlines that just crossed at the top of this hour. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Kremlin have confirmed a partial ceasefire. The U.S. had earlier said Russia and Ukraine agreed to a truce in the Black Sea. For more on all of this, let's go now to Washington and Bloomberg Balance of Power co-anchor Kailey Leinz. Kailey, can you give us a little more context here?
Well, Scarlett, while an agreement does seem to have been made by all sides involved here, the timeline is what is in question. Because, yes, you're right, we did get two statements from the U.S. regarding separate talks that were held in Saudi Arabia over the last few days. One talk set with Russia, another with Ukraine. And in both, the U.S. said both sides had agreed to ensure the safe transit in the Black Sea, as well as to look forward to the implementation of an energy infrastructure ceasefire. We then heard from the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, who told reporters in Kyiv that Ukraine intends to start that partial ceasefire immediately after these statements from the U.S. went out. Russia, though, is singing a bit of a different tune, saying that, well, yes, it did agree to a Black Sea ceasefire. That is dependent on sanctions relief, specifically on financial institutions that deal with Russian agricultural exports. They also said that they will be discussing with the U.S. the implementation of an energy infrastructure ceasefire. So indicating that this is not quite yet a done deal. It does seem like there is some mismatch between the parties here, keeping in mind, Scarlett, that to this point, these talks are still being held in kind of silos, if you will. The U.S. is talking separately with Russia, separately with Ukraine. It is not all three of them together at one table.
That's an interesting way of doing it because it promises a lot of room for misinterpretation, certainly. What kind of follow-up conversations do we know about are happening? Is this something where the conversations are still ongoing? There's another day of meetings scheduled, for instance, in Saudi Arabia?
There isn't one scheduled, at least for this round, but President Zelensky did indicate that the U.S. and Ukraine will be continuing discussions, not just on a ceasefire, which I would point out Ukraine is looking for a ceasefire in its entirety, not just the partial truces that have been agreed to thus far. I actually had the chance to speak with the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Makarova, on Balance of Power yesterday, who indicated that Ukraine is willing here, that they are not trying to be an impediment to a full ceasefire. But she told me it takes two to dance, and Russia is really the one that they have to wait on here. But Zelensky said these talks will be continuing, also noting that the U.S. has presented Ukraine with a different profit-sharing agreement when it comes to minerals. This is, of course, a deal that was intended to be signed weeks ago when Zelensky visited the White House until things fell apart in the Oval Office. He said Ukraine is now reviewing that proposal. So those talks are also in the works as they work more broadly with peace, and the U.S., of course, trying to apply some pressure on Russia toward that end. But Russia widely is seen, at least among geopolitical experts that I've been speaking with, as slow-walking this process thus far.
All right, well, we'll see how this plays out in the days to come. Kailey Leinz, thank you so much.